I sit perfectly still in my leather chair, watching my 8-year-old granddaughter arrange birthday presents on the Persian rug, and calculate exactly how I'm going to destroy her parents. Not physically, of course. At 74, I've moved beyond crude violence into something far more sophisticated: financial annihilation. The kind of elegant warfare that leaves victims breathing but broke, alive but eternally aware of their own stupidity. Yesterday, while little Helena napped upstairs in innocent bliss, I heard my son Peter and daughter-in-law Mary plotting to steal my $100 million fortune. Their plan was simple: have me declared mentally incompetent, seize power of attorney, and drain every account before Helena could inherit her birthright. They think grief has made me weak. They think mourning my beloved wife Ellen for 3 years has left me vulnerable, confused, ripe for manipulation. They're about to discover that Charles Morrison didn't build an oil empire by being anyone's victim. The morning light filtered through the Venetian blinds of Charles Morrison's River Oaks mansion, casting prison bar shadows across the Persian rug where his 8-year-old granddaughter Helena sat cross-legged, carefully arranging her birthday presents. August in Houston meant the air conditioning hummed its eternal song, a mechanical lullaby that had soundtracked 63 years of his life in this city of oil and ambition. Charles watched her small fingers work with surgical precision, placing each gift in order of size, then color, then some mysterious logic only children understand. The sight should have warmed his 74-year-old heart. Instead, it crystallized something cold and sharp in his chest. Because yesterday, while Helena napped in the guest room upstairs, Charles had heard his son Peter and daughter-in-law Mary planning to steal everything from them both. The irony wasn't lost on him. After 4 decades building Morrison Industries from a single oil rig into a Houston empire, after surviving market crashes and family tragedies, after watching his beloved Ellen slip away to cancer 3 years ago, it would be his own blood that delivered the killing blow. But Charles Morrison hadn't clawed his way from the refineries of East Houston to the boardrooms of downtown by folding when the stakes got high. He was simply going to destroy them first. If you feel like this story might reach you somehow, follow the channel. That way, you help me bring more stories like this, and we grow with every life we learn from. 2 days earlier, the conversation had drifted up through the heating vents like poison gas. Charles had been in his study, reviewing Helena's trust fund documents, a routine he'd maintained since Ellen's death, ensuring every detail remained perfect for his granddaughter's future. The central air carried voices from the kitchen below with crystalline clarity. "The old man's losing it, Peter? Did you see him yesterday? He put salt in his coffee." Salt. Mary's voice held that particular blend of concern and calculation that Charles recognized from countless business negotiations. She was setting up her chess pieces. "Mom just died 3 years ago, Mary. He's grieving. Not grieving doesn't pay for Helena's private school, or a mortgage, or your medical bills." The sound of chair legs scraping against tile punctuated her words. "Look, Dorothy Parker Henderson told me he's been talking to himself in the garden. Full conversations with your mother. The neighbors are starting to notice." Peter's response came softer, weaker. Charles closed his eyes, recognizing the tone from his son's childhood, the same defeated inflection Peter used when other kids took his lunch money. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we protect our family, Helena's future, your father's dignity." Each word dropped like a chess piece claiming territory. "Dr. Rodriguez already thinks he should be evaluated for cognitive decline. One conversation about his behavior, and we can have him declared incompetent. Power of attorney transfers to you. We manage his assets responsibly." That sounds like love, Peter. Like responsibility. Like saving him from himself. Charles had set down his reading glasses with deliberate precision. In the silence that followed, he could hear his heartbeat counting seconds, measuring the precise moment his son would either find his spine or lose it forever. "How long do you think we have?" And there it was, the surrendering sigh of a weak man choosing easy betrayal over difficult loyalty. Charles Morrison smiled then, the same predatory expression that had intimidated oil executives and city councilmen for decades. He'd raised a sheep, but sheep could be herded and slaughtered. Time to remember why Houston feared his name. Present day, Helena's birthday morning. Grandpa Charles, why do grown-ups always look sad when they think kids aren't watching? Helena's question sliced through his dark meditation. She'd stopped arranging gifts and was studying his face with the unflinching directness of childhood. Charles knelt beside her, his knees protesting the movement. At 8, Helena possessed Ellen's penetrating intelligence and her own devastating honesty. She'd inherited the Morrison ability to read people like balance sheets. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings, little bird. Mom and Dad whisper a lot now. Are you sick? The question hung in the conditioned air between them. Charles measured his granddaughter's face, seeing Ellen's cheekbones, Peter's uncertain eyes, but something entirely her own in the tilt of her chin. Determination, strength his son had never developed. No, Helena, I'm not sick. Are they? Smart girl. Too smart for her own good, maybe. But intelligence was armor in this world, and she'd need every piece she could gather. Your parents love you very much. It wasn't an answer, and Helena knew it. She nodded anyway, returning to her gift arrangement with the resigned wisdom of a child, learning that adults traffic in careful half-truths. Charles stood, watching her work. In 2 hours, family and friends would fill this house with laughter and birthday songs. Mary would play the devoted daughter-in-law, Peter the concerned son. They'd embrace him, praise his generosity, toast Helena's future, and Charles would smile back, knowing exactly what each smile cost. 3 hours later, the party moved through its choreographed phases with Houston society precision. Dorothy Parker Henderson arrived fashionably late in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and gossip, immediately cornering Mary near the buffet table. Charles watched them from across the living room, two predators recognizing each other's scent. Charles Morrison, you outdid yourself, Dorothy announced, her voice carrying that particular volume that demanded an audience. This spread could feed the Astros, though I suppose after 40 years of Ellen's parties, you've had practice. The mention of Ellen's name created its intended pause in nearby conversations. Dorothy wielded memory like a scalpel, precise in her cutting. Ellen always said the secret to a good party was making everyone feel essential. Charles replied, accepting Dorothy's air kiss with practiced grace, even the ones who weren't. Dorothy's laugh tinkled like breaking crystal. Oh, you wicked man. Speaking of essential, I ran into Dr. Rodriguez at River Oaks Country Club yesterday. He mentioned some concerns about my golf game, I hope. Though at my age, any game that doesn't require an ambulance counts as victory. The deflection worked, drawing more laughter from their expanding circle. But Dorothy's eyes sharpened, recognizing the maneuver. Charles cataloged the moment. She'd been recruited as Mary's reconnaissance scout, probing for signs of mental decline that could support an incompetency claim. Interesting. Mary was more thorough than he'd credited. Across the room, Helena opened presents with methodical joy, each gift receiving equal attention, regardless of its expense. She thanked Great Aunt Mildred's handmade scarf with the same enthusiasm she'd shown for the new iPad from her parents. Ellen would have been proud. Peter hovered near Helena like an anxious bodyguard, his forced smiles broadcasting guilt to anyone trained to read faces. Mary worked the room with political efficiency, collecting compliments for her party planning skills while steering conversations toward Charles's recent episodes. Charles observed it all with the detached fascination of a chess master watching amateurs discover they were playing against a grandmaster. The trap was already set. They simply didn't know they were walking into it. That evening, after the guests departed and Helena fell asleep surrounded by birthday wrapping paper, Charles found Peter and Mary in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher with surgical precision. Their movements held the synchronized rhythm of a married couple executing a familiar dance. Quite a party, Charles said, settling into Ellen's chair at the breakfast nook. The fabric still held traces of her lavender perfume, a sensory ghost that had haunted him for 3 years. Helena loved it, Mary replied, not looking up from her plate stacking, though Dorothy Parker Henderson seemed concerned about something. She mentioned you've been struggling lately? Peter's hands stilled on a champagne flute. Charles watched his son's reflection in the kitchen window, a middle-aged man caught between his wife's ambition and his father's judgment, trapped in the eternal adolescence of the weak-willed. Dorothy's always been theatrical. comes from too many community theater productions. Dad. Peter finally turned, his face wearing the expression Charles remembered from childhood confessions. If you're having difficulties, we want to help. The word difficulties carry careful weight, a legal term that could be referenced later in competency hearings. Charles admired Mary's coaching. She'd trained Peter well. What kind of difficulties did you have in mind? Mary stepped forward, assuming control with the smooth confidence of a closer moving in for the signature. Memory issues. Confusion. The neighbors have noticed you talking to yourself in the garden. Ah, Charles nodded thoughtfully. And you're concerned about my mental state? We're concerned about Helena's future, Peter said, finding unexpected strength in his voice. About your safety. About making sure you're protected. Protected. Another carefully chosen word. Charles felt Ellen's presence like a whisper against his ear, her voice carrying the warning she'd given him years ago. Peter's good-hearted, Charles. But goodness without strength is just weakness with better marketing. And that Mary, she's got calculations where her heart should be. Ellen had been right, as always. She'd seen through Mary's performance from their first meeting, recognized the predatory patience beneath the dutiful daughter-in-law act. I appreciate your concern, Charles said finally. Both of you. Family looking out for family. That's what Ellen would have wanted. Relief flickered across Peter's face. Mary smiled, but Charles caught the triumphant gleam in her eyes. She thought she'd won, thought the old man was capitulating. Charles Morrison had built an empire by letting people underestimate him. Some lessons never got old. In fact, he continued, I've been thinking about simplifying things, making arrangements that would give you both peace of mind. Peter and Mary exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication that spoke volumes about their planning sessions. What kind of arrangements? Mary asked. Charles stood, moving to the kitchen window that overlooked Ellen's rose garden. The August heat had stressed the blooms, but they persisted, thorny survivors in Houston's unforgiving climate. Like him, legal arrangements, power of attorney, simplified estate management. I'm meeting with Harold Pemberton tomorrow afternoon to discuss options. Harold Pemberton had been Charles's attorney for 30 years, a man whose discretion was matched only by his creative interpretation of estate law. If anyone could construct a legal maze, Harold was the architect. That sounds wise, Peter said carefully. Does it? Charles turned from the window, studying their faces. Because I'd hate to burden you both with responsibilities you're not prepared for. Managing significant wealth requires certain qualities. Mary's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. We understand the responsibilities, Charles. We want to help carry them. I'm sure you do. The words hung in the kitchen air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Charles kissed them both goodnight and climbed the stairs to his bedroom, leaving behind the sound of whispered conversations and clinking glassware. In his study, he pulled Ellen's letter from the desk drawer where he'd kept it for 3 years. Her handwriting, elegant even in illness, filled 2 pages with observations about Mary's character and warnings about Peter's weakness. She'd known exactly what would happen after her death. If you're reading this, my darling, it means I was right about Mary's patience. She's waited for me to die, and now she's making her move. Don't let sentiment make you stupid. You built an empire by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone around you. Don't stop now. Protect Helena, and show Peter what strength looks like, even if he's too weak to learn the lesson. I love you. Make them pay. Charles folded the letter carefully, returning it to its drawer. Tomorrow, Harold Pemberton would help him construct the most beautiful legal trap Houston had ever seen. But tonight, he sat in Ellen's chair and remembered how she'd always smelled like roses and steel. The next afternoon, Pemberton and Associates, Harold Pemberton's corner office, commanded a view of downtown Houston's gleaming towers, monuments to oil money and aerospace ambitions. At 65, Harold possessed a silver-haired gravitas that made juries trust him and opponents underestimate him. Charles, you magnificent bastard, Harold said, reviewing the documents spread across his mahogany desk. This is either brilliant or psychotic, possibly both. Can it work? Oh, it'll work. The question is whether you can live with the consequences. You're about to nuke your relationship with Peter. Charles gazed out at the Houston skyline, watching heat mirages rise from concrete and steel. My relationship with Peter died when he chose to betray me rather than protect his daughter. This is just making it official. Harold nodded, understanding the calculation. They'd orchestrated hostile takeovers together, dismantled family businesses, restructured empires. This was simply another campaign. Walk me through it one more time. Charles turned from the window, his voice carrying the crisp authority that had intimidated boardrooms for decades. Phase 1. I appear to capitulate. Sign limited power of attorney documents that give Peter and Mary control over daily financial decisions. They think they've won, but the real assets are already transferred. The house, the investment accounts, Morrison Industries stock, all of it goes into an irrevocable trust with Helena as the sole beneficiary. The trust won't vest until she's 25, but the assets are completely protected. Harold made notes on his legal pad. And what Peter inherits: debt, the mortgage I took out against properties I no longer own. Credit lines secured against assets that are now Helena's. Business loans guaranteed by stock that's already been transferred. Jesus, Charles. They'll be financially destroyed. They'll have exactly what they earned through their loyalty and character. Charles settled into the leather chair across from Harold's desk. Peter will inherit the consequences of his choices. Mary will discover the calculations without wisdom equal bankruptcy. Harold studied the documents again, his legal mind checking for flaws. The beauty is that it's completely legal. Aggressive estate planning within the bounds of Texas law. Though I suspect they'll challenge it. Let them. By the time they realize what happened, Helena will have the best legal representation oil money can buy. And Peter will be too busy dealing with creditors to mount an effective challenge. What about Helena? This puts her in a difficult position with her parents. Charles had wrestled with this question for sleepless nights. Helena would be caught in the crossfire, forced to watch her parents face the consequences of their betrayal. But the alternative, letting them steal her future, was worse. Helena will be protected. The trust includes provisions for her education, health care, and living expenses until she's 25. After that, she have the resources to make her own choices about family relationships. Harold signed the final documents with a fountain pen that had cost more than most people's cars. When do you spring the trap? Tonight, family dinner. I'll announce my decision to simplify my affairs. Make Peter and Mary feel like they've manipulated me successfully. Tomorrow morning, you file everything with the county clerk. And then? Charles Morrison smiled, the expression carrying 40 years of business warfare and 3 years of suppressed grief. And then we see what they're really made of. That evening, the Morrison house, Charles had Ellen's cook prepare pot roast with all the traditional sides. The kind of comfort meal that created artificial warmth and false intimacy. Mary arrived in a new dress, Nordstrom, probably judging by the cut and fabric. She'd been shopping with anticipated inheritance money. Helena chattered about her day at summer camp, describing swimming lessons and art projects with the unlimited enthusiasm of childhood. Charles absorbed every word, memorizing moments that might become more precious after tonight's revelation changed everything. Grandpa Charles, are you sad again? Helena asked between bites of mashed potatoes. Just thinking, little bird, about Grandma Ellen? Among other things. Mary and Peter exchanged glances across the dining room table, reading significance into Charles's contemplative mood. They thought grief was making him vulnerable, pliable, ready for manipulation. Charles let them think it. After Helena was excused to play in the living room, Charles produced the power of attorney documents Harold had prepared. The papers looked official, intimidating, exactly what Peter and Mary expected from estate planning. I've decided you're both right, Charles announced, setting the documents on the table between the dessert plates. I need help managing things. These papers give you joint power of attorney over my financial affairs. Peter reached for the documents with trembling fingers. Charles watched his son's face transform as he read the legal language, seeing dollar signs replacing doubt. Dad, are you sure about this? I'm sure about family, Peter. About trusting the people who care about Helena's future. Mary leaned over Peter's shoulder, scanning the documents with predatory focus. Charles admired her poker face. She revealed nothing, but he could practically hear the mental calculations. This is comprehensive, she said finally. Harold Pemberton doesn't do things halfway. You'll have full authority over investments, property management, business decisions. I'll keep a small personal account for daily expenses, but everything else becomes your responsibility. Charles watched them process the magnitude of what they thought they'd gained. Morrison Industries stock alone was worth $40 million. The real estate portfolio added another $20 million. Investment accounts, bonds, commodities. They thought they'd just inherited control of a $100 million empire. They had no idea they were signing up to manage other people's debts. When does this take effect? Peter asked. As soon as I sign and you both witness the signatures. Harold files everything tomorrow morning. Charles produced his gold fountain pen, Ellen's gift for their 20th anniversary, and signed his name with ceremonial precision. Peter and Mary added their signatures as witnesses, their hands steady with anticipated wealth. There, Charles said, capping the pen. It's done. Mary moved around the table to embrace him, her performance flawless in its artificial warmth. Thank you for trusting us, Charles. We won't let you down. Peter's hug felt genuine, which somehow made it worse. His son actually believed he was helping, convinced himself that betrayal was love disguised as protection. I know you won't, Charles replied, meaning something entirely different. From the living room came the sound of Helena's laughter as she played with her birthday toys, innocent of the legal warfare that had just been declared in her name. Charles Morrison had spent 3 years grieving his wife and planning his revenge. Tomorrow, he'd discover which had been more valuable. The next morning, Pemberton and Associates Harold's phone call came at 7 a.m. While Charles sat in his study drinking coffee and watching Ellen's rose garden catch the morning light. It's done, Harold said without preamble. All documents filed and recorded. Ellen's trust is legally bulletproof, and your son now owns the most expensive collection of debt in Houston history. How long before they realize? Days, probably. The first mortgage payment on the River Oaks property comes due next week. When they try to access the Morrison Industries account to cover it, they'll discover the stock has been transferred. That's when the fun begins. Charles sipped his coffee, tasting satisfaction and sadness in equal measure. Any regrets, Harold? About the legality? None. This is the most creative estate restructuring I've ever orchestrated. About your family relationships? That's above my pay grade, old friend. Fair enough. Charles hung up and returned to his newspaper, reading about oil prices and city council elections while his son and daughter-in-law slept peacefully upstairs, dreaming of wealth that had already evaporated. The beautiful thing about revenge, Charles reflected, was its patience. It could wait for the perfect moment, accumulate interest like a well-managed investment, then deliver returns that exceeded the original injury. Peter and Mary had stolen 3 days of his trust. He'd stolen the rest of their lives. 1 week later, the first cracks appeared during breakfast on a Wednesday morning. Mary sat at the kitchen table surrounded by financial documents, her calculator clicking like an agitated insect. These numbers don't make sense, she muttered, cross-referencing bank statements with investment portfolios. Charles continued eating his oatmeal, adding blueberries with deliberate precision. Helena worked on coloring pages beside him, her tongue poking out in concentration. Peter emerged from his shower, hair still damp, wearing the worried expression that had become his default since assuming power of attorney. What numbers? Peter asked. All of them. Look at this. The Morrison Industries account shows a balance of $12 million. But when I called yesterday to arrange the transfer for the River Oaks mortgage, they said the account was frozen pending ownership verification. Charles felt Helen's eyes on him but continued studying his newspaper. The business section featured an article about estate planning strategies for high-net-worth families. The irony wasn't lost on him. Maybe it's just paperwork, Peter suggested. Banks move slowly with large transfers. For a week? Peter, we're supposed to make the mortgage payment tomorrow. $38,000. Helena looked up from her coloring. Why does our house cost so much money? Mary's laugh held an edge of hysteria. Good question, sweetie. Why does everything cost so much money? Charles folded his newspaper with theatrical precision. Problems with the banking? Just some confusion about account access, Mary said, her voice carefully controlled. Nothing we can't handle. But Charles caught the glance between husband and wife, saw the first seeds of panic taking root. They'd expected simple wealth transfer, not bureaucratic complications and frozen accounts. Harold Pemberton handles all my banking relationships, Charles offered helpfully. Perhaps he could clarify things. Mary's smile stretched thin as plastic wrap. That's actually a good idea. Could you call him? Of course. Family helping family. Charles dialed Harold's direct number, knowing his old friend would be expecting the call. The performance that followed was worthy of community theater. Harold? Charles Morrison. Yes, I'm well, thank you. Listen, Peter and Mary are having some difficulty accessing the investment accounts. I see ... frozen pending. What? Transfer verification? Harold, I signed the power of attorney papers exactly as you instructed. What do you mean the assets have been transferred? Charles held the phone away from his ear, letting Harold's amplified voice fill the kitchen with legal terminology and bureaucratic confusion. Peter and Mary leaned forward, catching fragments of words like irrevocable trust and beneficiary designation and asset protection. Harold, slow down. You're saying the Morrison Industries stock has been what? When? But I never authorized. Oh, the estate planning we discussed last month? But that was just preliminary. I see ... I see. Charles let the conversation continue for several more minutes, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. When he finally hung up, the kitchen silence stretched like a held breath. What did he say? Peter asked. Charles rubbed his forehead with shaking fingers, suddenly looking every day of his 74 years. There's been a misunderstanding. Apparently, some of the estate planning documents I signed last month were more comprehensive than I realized. Assets have been transferred into an irrevocable trust. What kind of trust? Mary's voice could have cut glass. For Helena's benefit, the stock, the investment accounts, most of the real estate. It's all been placed in a protective trust that vests when she turns 25. The words hit the kitchen like grenades. Helena continued coloring, innocent of the financial warfare exploding around her breakfast table. Peter's face went white, then red, then white again. Mary stood so quickly, her chair toppled backward. That's impossible. You said the power of attorney gave us control over your assets. It does. It does. Over whatever assets remain in my name. Charles met her furious stare with practiced calm. Apparently, Harold moved most everything into trust before we signed the power of attorney documents. Then change it back. Mary ... Charles's voice carried gentle regret. It's an irrevocable trust. That means it can't be changed. Harold explained the tax advantages, the asset protection benefits. I thought it was the responsible thing to do. Peter found his voice, though it came out strangled. Dad, what exactly do we control? Charles produced a legal document from his bathrobe pocket, sliding it across the table like a death sentence. The mortgage on properties I no longer own. Business loans secured by stock, that's now Helena's. Credit lines guaranteed against assets in the trust. Mary snatched the papers, her eyes racing across the legal language. Charles watched her face transform as she grasped the mathematical reality of their situation. We're responsible for. Jesus Christ. Peter, we inherited $40 million in debt. Helena looked up from her coloring again. What's debt? Charles leaned over to examine her artwork, a family of stick figures standing in front of a house with flowers. Debt is what happens when you want something you haven't earned yet, little bird. Oh. Helena returned to her coloring with the philosophical acceptance of childhood. Peter slumped into his chair like a deflating balloon. Dad, there has to be something we can do. Harold made a mistake. You didn't understand what you were signing. Are you suggesting I'm not mentally competent to make financial decisions, son? The question hung in the kitchen air like a trap waiting to be sprung. Peter and Mary had spent weeks building a case for Charles's cognitive decline, gathering evidence of his mental fragility. Now, claiming incompetency would invalidate the power of attorney documents they'd worked so hard to obtain. No, Of course not, Peter said quickly. Then we proceed as planned. You and Mary manage my remaining assets responsibly. I trust your judgment completely. Mary crumpled the legal documents in her fists, her facade of dutiful daughter-in-law finally cracking. You son of a bitch. You knew exactly what you were doing. Charles's expression never changed, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Mary, please. Not in front of Helena. But Mary was past caring about appearances. 3 years of patient manipulation, weeks of careful planning, dreams of inherited wealth, all of it evaporating like Houston humidity in air conditioning. You manipulative bastard. You led us on, made us think we were inheriting your fortune, and instead you've stuck us with your debts. Mary, that's enough. Peter's voice carried more strength than Charles had heard in years. Is it, Peter? Is it enough? Because we're looking at bankruptcy. Our house, our cars, Helena's school, everything is gone. And your father sits there eating his goddamned oatmeal like he hasn't just destroyed our lives. Helena's coloring stopped. Her small face had gone pale, sensing the adult storm breaking around her. Charles set down his spoon with deliberate care and looked directly at Mary for the first time that morning. You want to know what I knew, Mary? I knew that you and Peter were planning to have me declared incompetent. I knew you'd been talking to Dorothy Parker Henderson about my mental state, gathering ammunition for a legal challenge to my capacity. I knew you'd contacted Dr. Rodriguez about having me evaluated for dementia. Mari's mouth opened, but no words came out. I knew, Charles continued, his voice never rising above conversational level, because Harold Pemberton has been my attorney for 30 years. And attorneys talk to each other. Rodriguez mentioned your concerns to Harold during their golf game. Dorothy Parker Henderson's late husband helped me acquire my first oil leases, and she still considers herself family. Charles stood, his movements unhurried, deliberate. Most importantly, I knew because Ellen warned me. 3 years ago, while she was dying of cancer, she made me promise to protect Helena from exactly this kind of betrayal. He moved to the kitchen counter, retrieving Ellen's letter from behind the coffee canister where he'd hidden it. Would you like to know what your mother-in-law really thought of you, Mary? What she saw beneath your performance of devoted daughter-in-law? Mary's face had gone ashen. Peter stared at the letter like it was a venomous snake. Charles unfolded Ellen's elegant handwriting, her words carrying across 3 years of silence. Mary's got calculations where her heart should be, Charles. She's been counting my jewelry and appraising our furniture for 2 years, waiting for me to die so she can claim her inheritance. And poor Peter, ... He's good-hearted but weak, and weakness in the face of greed becomes complicity. Helena had stopped pretending to color, her 8-year-old awareness processing the adult truths being revealed around her. Don't let sentiment make you stupid, my darling. They're planning to take everything from Helena's future to fund their present. Stop them. Make them pay for choosing betrayal over loyalty. Charles refolded the letter, his hands steady as stone. So yes, Mary, I knew exactly what I was doing. I honored my wife's wisdom and protected my granddaughter's future from people who would steal it to fund their own weaknesses. Mary's composure shattered completely. Years of calculated charm and patient manipulation dissolved into raw fury. You vindictive old bastard. We cared for you. We included you in our lives, our family. You tolerated me while you waited for me to die or lose my mind. There's a difference. Peter finally found his voice, though it came out as a broken whisper. Dad, how could you do this to us? Charles looked at his son, really looked at him, seeing the frightened little boy who'd hidden behind his mother's skirts, the insecure teenager who'd needed constant reassurance, the weak man who'd chosen easy betrayal over difficult loyalty. I didn't do this to you, Peter. I did this for Helena. You did this to yourselves when you chose greed over grandchildren, inheritance over integrity. We needed that money. My medical bills, Alana's education, the house payments. You needed to earn that money, to work for it, sacrifice for it, prove you deserved it. Instead, you chose theft disguised as concern. Charles moved to Helena's chair, kneeling beside her with careful attention to his aging joints. Little bird, Grandpa needs to tell you something important. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Sometimes they choose things that seem easier, but are actually much harder. Your parents made a mistake like that. Helena's eyes, Ellen's eyes, studied his face with devastating directness. Are you sending us away? The question hit Charles harder than Mary's fury or Peter's betrayal. In Helena's voice, he heard the echoes of every foster child, every divorce casualty, every innocent victim of adult failures. No, sweetheart, you'll always have a home here, but things are going to be different for a while. Your parents have some problems to solve, some mistakes to fix. Will you help them? Charles felt Ellen's presence like a whisper against his neck, a voice carrying the wisdom that had guided him through 4 decades of marriage. Yes, little bird, I'll help them. But sometimes help looks different than we expect. He stood, addressing Peter and Mary with the measured tone he'd used in countless business negotiations. Here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices. Option 1, walk away. Declare bankruptcy. Start over somewhere else. Abandon Helena to my care. Option 2, stay and fight. Work to pay down the debts you've inherited. Rebuild your lives through effort instead of inheritance. Prove to your daughter that mistakes can be corrected through character. Mary laughed bitterly. Some choice. Financial destruction or financial destruction with extra steps. The difference, Charles said, is what Helena learns from watching you. Does she learn that failure is final? That parents abandon children when things get difficult? Or does she learn that integrity matters more than comfort? That love is proven through sacrifice rather than convenience? Peter stared at the legal documents scattered across the kitchen table, seeing 40 million reasons why his father's moral mathematics didn't add up to survival. Dad, we can't pay these debts. The mortgages alone are more than my salary. We'll lose everything. Then you'll have to get creative. Sell the cars. Downsize the house. Find additional income. Discover what you're actually capable of when survival depends on effort rather than inheritance. Charles pulled out his checkbook, writing with the same fountain pen he'd used to sign their trap. I'm prepared to help, but on very specific terms. This check covers Helena's school tuition for the next year. There will be similar checks for her health care, her summer camps, her basic needs. But your needs, your mortgage, your cars, your credit cards, those are now your responsibility. He tore out the check and placed it on the table between them. Think of it as character development. Ellen always said adversity reveals who people really are. Consider this your revelation. Mary snatched the check, studying the amount with desperate calculations. $32,000. Helena's tuition. Exactly. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Enough to ensure she doesn't suffer for your choices, but not enough to make your choices comfortable. Peter's voice carried the hollow echo of a man watching his life collapse in real time. And if we can't manage the rest? Charles moved to the kitchen window, gazing out at Ellen's rose garden, where drought-stressed blooms persisted despite Houston's punishing heat. Then Helena learns that her parents were willing to steal her future, but not willing to sacrifice their present. She learns that love has conditions, that family loyalty is negotiable, that blood relations guarantee nothing about character. The words hit their target with surgical precision. Peter's face crumpled, recognizing the mathematical cruelty of his father's logic. This is about more than money, isn't it? Charles turned from the window, his expression softening slightly as he looked at Helena's coloring pages scattered across the breakfast table. This is about everything except money, son. It's about the kind of people you choose to be when you think no one's watching. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice for the people you claim to love. It's about whether weakness is a permanent condition or a temporary failure. He collected Helena's art supplies, organizing them with the same methodical precision he'd brought to business deals and estate planning. Ellen and I built our fortune by being smarter, more determined, and more ruthless than everyone around us. But we did it together, as partners, protecting each other and planning for our family's future. Charles met Peter's eyes directly, father to son, man to man. You had a chance to be that kind of partner. Instead, you chose to be prey, letting Mary's ambitions substitute for your own backbone. This is your opportunity to discover whether you can still learn strength or whether weakness is your permanent address. Helena had been listening with the focused intensity that children bring to adult conversations they're not supposed to understand. Now she spoke into the kitchen silence with devastating clarity. "Grandpa Charles, did Mom and Dad try to steal from me?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Charles knelt beside his granddaughter again, choosing his words with the care of a surgeon selecting instruments. "They tried to take something that belonged to your future, little bird. Sometimes grown-ups get scared about money and make bad choices. Are they bad people?" Charles glanced at Peter and Mary, seeing his son's face crumple with shame and his daughter-in-law's eyes harden with unrepentant calculation. "No, sweetheart. They're scared people who made bad choices. There's a difference." Helena nodded with the philosophical acceptance of childhood, then returned to her coloring, as if financial warfare and family betrayal were simply more inexplicable adult behaviors to be endured. Mary broke the silence with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Scared people. That's rich, coming from a man who just spent months orchestrating his own family's destruction. I spent months protecting my granddaughter from people who would steal her future to fund their present." Charles stood, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had intimidated oil executives for decades. "There's a difference there, too." Peter finally looked up from the wreckage of legal documents, his face aged by the last hour's revelations. "What happens now, Dad? Now you choose. Walk away and abandon Helena, or stay and prove that mistakes can be corrected through character. But choose quickly. The first mortgage payment is due tomorrow, and I suspect your credit rating is about to become very educational." 6 months later, the changes came slowly, then all at once, like bankruptcy and redemption always do. Peter found work at a downtown accounting firm, trading his home office and flexible schedule for fluorescent lights and billable hours. The salary barely covered their downsized apartment's rent, but it was honest money earned through effort rather than inheritance. Mary took a position at Helena's school administrative assistant, scheduling parent conferences and managing enrollment paperwork. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that she now worked for the institution she'd once planned to fund through stolen money. Helena adapted with the resilience of childhood, trading her River Oaks mansion for a 2-bedroom apartment near the Heights, her private playground for public parks, her entitled comfort for earned affection. Charles watched it all from his study window, drinking morning coffee and reading about oil prices, while his family rebuilt their lives from the wreckage of their choices. The most surprising development was Peter's gradual transformation, stripped of inherited expectations and Mary's manipulative guidance. He discovered reserves of strength that 43 years of comfortable weakness had never required. He worked 60-hour weeks without complaint, studied tax code during lunch breaks, earned respect through competence rather than birthright. Mary's evolution proved more complex. Initially, she raged against their reduced circumstances with the fury of someone discovering that calculations without wisdom equal suffering. But gradually, unexpectedly, she began to find satisfaction in work that produced tangible results rather than phantom inheritances. Helena spent weekends with Charles, helping tend Ellen's rose garden and learning the difference between wealth and worth, between having and earning, between inheritance and integrity. "Grandpa Charles," she said one Saturday morning while deadheading drought-stressed blooms, "why didn't you just tell Mom and Dad no when they wanted your money?" Charles considered the question while securing a climbing rose against the garden trellis. At 8, Helena possessed a directness that cut through adult complexity like a blade through tissue. Because saying no wouldn't have taught them anything, little bird. Sometimes people need to experience the consequences of their choices to understand why those choices were wrong. Did it hurt to be mean to them? Mean, children's vocabulary for adult moral complexity. Charles set down his pruning shears, recognizing the weight of the question. "Yes, sweetheart, it hurt. But sometimes love requires hard choices. Sometimes protecting someone means disappointing them first." Helena nodded thoughtfully, her small hands gentle with the thorny roses. "Like when you make me eat vegetables before dessert?" Exactly like that. They worked in comfortable silence for several minutes, grandfather and granddaughter sharing the meditative rhythm of garden maintenance. Ellen's roses had survived another Houston summer, their persistence a testament to proper care and stubborn resilience. Will Mom and Dad ever be happy again? The question carried the unconscious weight of every child caught in adult conflicts, wondering if their security depends on their parents' emotional stability. Charles chose his words carefully, understanding that 8-year-old ears were recording promises for future reference. Your parents are learning to be proud of themselves in new ways, Helena. Pride built on earning feels different than pride built on having. Better, I think, though it takes longer to develop. Do you forgive them? Charles paused, considering the theological complexity of forgiveness when justice remains incomplete. Peter and Mary had 6 years of debt payments ahead of them. 6 years to prove that character could be learned and weakness overcome. I'm learning to forgive them, little bird. Forgiveness is like gardening. It takes time, patience, and daily attention. Helena accepted this explanation with the equanimity of childhood, returning to her careful work among the thorns and blooms. 1 year later, Helena's 9th birthday, the party was smaller this year, held in Peter and Mary's Heights apartment rather than the River Oaks mansion. Folding chairs replaced antique furniture. Grocery store cakes substituted for custom confections. But Helena's laughter carried the same joy that had filled more expensive celebrations. Charles arrived with a single gift, a leather-bound journal engraved with Helena's initials, and Ellen's favorite quote, "Strength isn't inherited, it's earned daily." Dorothy Parker Henderson made an appearance, her curiosity about the Morrison family's dramatic reversal overcoming her social awkwardness. She circulated through the small gathering like an anthropologist studying foreign customs, fascinated by wealth's transformation into something resembling ordinary human struggle. "Charles Morrison," she announced during cake service. "I have to say, this is the most interesting family drama I've witnessed since the oil boom. How does it feel to watch your son discover he has a backbone?" Charles glanced across the apartment to where Peter was helping Helena open presents, his movements carrying new confidence born of earned respect rather than inherited position. Like watching someone learn to walk, Dorothy. Painful, necessary, and ultimately beautiful. Mary emerged from the kitchen carrying fresh coffee, her movements efficient with the grace of someone who'd learned to find satisfaction in useful work. She'd lost weight during the past year, not from stress but from purpose. Administrative work at Helena's school had revealed organizational talents that hostess duties had never required. "Coffee, Mrs. Henderson?" "Thank you, dear. And please, call me Dorothy. I think we're past formal pretenses, don't you?" Mary's smile carried genuine warmth rather than calculated charm. "I think we are." Charles observed the interaction with the satisfaction of a chess master watching long-term strategy produce unexpected benefits. Mary's transformation had surprised everyone, most notably Mary herself. Stripped of the option to manipulate her way to comfort, she discovered capabilities that manipulation had never developed. Peter approached carrying Helena's new journal, his face carrying the particular exhaustion that comes from meaningful work rather than comfortable avoidance. "Dad, this is beautiful. Ellen would have loved seeing Helena with this." "Ellen would have loved seeing all of this," Charles replied, gesturing toward the modest apartment where his family was rebuilding their lives through effort rather than entitlement. Peter followed his father's gaze, taking inventory of their reduced circumstances with eyes that had learned to see abundance in unexpected places. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For not letting me stay weak." The words carried weight that surprised both men. Charles felt Ellen's presence like a whisper against his neck, her voice carrying approval across 3 years of silence. "You're welcome, though I suspect the hardest work is still ahead." Peter nodded, understanding that strength was a daily choice rather than a permanent achievement. Mary's pregnant. The announcement hit Charles like unexpected percussion in a quiet symphony. He studied Peter's face, reading joy mixed with terror, hope tempered by realistic assessment of their financial situation. "Congratulations. How do you feel about raising 2 children on an accountant's salary?" Peter's laugh carried notes of panic and determination in equal measure. Terrified, excited, determined to prove that love matters more than money. It does, though money for diapers and baby food doesn't hurt. Mary staying at the school through the pregnancy. Administrative work with decent benefits. We'll manage. Charles nodded, recognizing the mathematics of survival that had replaced the accounting of entitlement in his son's vocabulary. And Helena? How does she feel about becoming a big sister? Thrilled. She's already planning how to teach the baby about Grandma Ellen's roses. Charles felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of grief that had held him rigid for 3 years. Ellen's legacy would continue through Helena's stories, through garden lessons and inherited wisdom, through the strength that his granddaughter was learning to see as normal rather than exceptional. Ellen would like that. Across the apartment, Helena was demonstrating proper journal-writing posture to her assembled guests, channeling Ellen's graceful authority with 8-year-old earnestness. Mary watched with the particular smile that mothers reserve for children who exceed expectations, her face carrying pride that was earned rather than assumed. Charles Morrison had spent 60 years building an empire, 3 years planning revenge, and 1 year discovering that justice could transform into mercy without losing its effectiveness. His family was learning to be worthy of their name again. That was inheritance enough. 5 years later, Helena's 14th birthday, the journal had become Helena's most treasured possession. Its leather cover worn smooth by daily handling, its pages filled with observations about roses and resilience, about strength earned through adversity and character measured in choices rather than circumstances. Peter's accounting firm had promoted him to senior partner, recognition for 5 years of 60-hour weeks and mathematical precision applied to other people's financial complexity. Mary had completed her education degree, transitioning from administrative work to teaching 3rd grade at Helena's school. Their second child, Ellen Marie Morrison, named for the grandmother she'd never meet, toddled through the garden where Charles and Helena tended roses every Saturday morning. The Heights apartment had been replaced by a modest house near Memorial Park. Mortgage payments manageable on 2 teachers' salaries, supplemented by Peter's partnership income. No River Oaks mansion, but honest shelter earned through honest work. Charles, now 79, moved more slowly through the garden, but with the satisfaction of watching strength multiply across generations. Helena had inherited Ellen's steel spine and Charles's strategic mind, combined with something uniquely her own, the ability to see potential in people others had written off. "Grandpa Charles," Helena said while staking a new climbing rose, "I've been thinking about the trust fund." Charles paused in his pruning, recognizing the tone that preceded serious conversation. "What about it?" 11 more years until I turn 25. 11 years until I control all that money. That's the timeline Harold established. Is that concerning you?" Helena secured the rose against its trellis with hands that had learned Ellen's gentle strength. "I've been reading about the family business, Morrison Industries. Dad could never afford to buy back his father's company, even if it was for sale." Charles set down his pruning shears, understanding where this conversation was heading. "The trust was designed to protect your future, Helena, to ensure you had choices your parents' mistakes couldn't eliminate. But what if my choice is to give Dad his company back? What if my choice is to prove that forgiveness can be an investment strategy?" The question carried Ellen's wisdom filtered through Helena's generation, her perspective shaped by watching parents rebuild their lives through character rather than convenience. Charles studied his granddaughter's face, seeing echoes of Ellen's moral clarity and his own strategic thinking, but something uniquely Helena in the way she framed restoration as revolution. That's an interesting investment philosophy. Dad learned strength, Mom learned purpose. Maybe it's time for the family to learn wholeness. Charles felt Ellen's presence stronger than he had since her death, her voice carrying approval across 5 years of patient transformation. "Ellen would be proud of you. She'd be proud of all of us. Even you. Even me?" Helena's smile carried the devastating honesty that 14-year-old wisdom sometimes achieves. "Especially you. You chose justice over revenge, teaching over punishment. You made us all better than we were willing to be on our own." Charles Morrison had spent 5 years wondering if his methods had been too harsh, if protecting Helena's future had required destroying his family's present. Now, Watching his granddaughter plan to heal wounds that justice had opened, he understood that mercy and strength weren't opposites. They were partners in the long work of building character that could survive inheritance. Your parents will need to prove they can handle that kind of responsibility again. They've been proving it for 5 years. Every mortgage payment, every report card conference, every Saturday morning when Dad helps you with the roses he used to ignore. Helena was right. Peter's transformation had been as thorough as it was unexpected. Weakness replaced by strength that adversity had revealed rather than created. Mary's evolution from calculation to compassion had surprised everyone, most notably Mary herself. And if they fail, if comfort makes them weak again? Helena's laugh carried Ellen's musical certainty. Then I'll do what you did, Grandpa. I'll love them enough to let them face the consequences of their choices. But I don't think that will be necessary. Charles nodded, recognizing the mathematics of mercy that his granddaughter had learned through watching justice transform into restoration. We'll see, little bird, we'll see. That evening, as Houston's summer heat finally broke and Ellen's roses released their perfume into the twilight air, Charles Morrison sat in his study and wrote a letter to Harold Pemberton. The trust fund would remain unchanged until Helena turned 25, but its ultimate purpose was becoming clear. Not punishment disguised as protection, but preparation for the moment when mercy could safely replace justice, when love could be trusted with the power to forgive without enabling. Ellen had been right about everything, as always, but Helena was proving that the next generation could improve even on wisdom, could build bridges where their elders had been content to construct walls. Charles Morrison had spent his life building an empire. His granddaughter was planning to build something better, a family worthy of inheriting it. Outside his window, Ellen's roses bloomed in the gathering darkness. Their persistence, a testament to proper care and stubborn hope. Their beauty proof that even the most carefully tended gardens sometimes surprise their gardeners with colors they never expected to see. Some inheritances, Charles realized, were worth the wait. Epilogue. Helena's 25th birthday, the law offices of Pemberton and Associates had been redecorated twice since Charles first orchestrated his elegant revenge. But Harold's corner office still commanded the same view of downtown Houston's gleaming towers. At 86, Harold moved more slowly, but retained the sharp legal mind that had constructed the most creative estate planning strategy in Texas history. Helena Morrison, now 25 and bearing her grandmother's composure alongside her grandfather's strategic intelligence, sat across from Harold's mahogany desk reviewing documents that would transfer control of a $100 million trust fund into her hands. Charles, 84 and still sharp as legal steel, observed the proceedings with the satisfaction of a chess master watching a long-term strategy reach its intended conclusion. Peter and Mary sat nearby, their hands intertwined with the unconscious intimacy of couples who had survived testing that would have destroyed weaker partnerships. Little Ellen, now 5 years old and possessed of her grandmother's devastating directness, colored quietly in a chair beside her parents, occasionally asking questions that cut through adult complexity with surgical precision. "Miss Morrison," Harold announced, his voice carrying the ceremonial weight of legal transfer. "As of today, you have full control over the Morrison Family Trust, including all assets previously held in protective custody." Helena accepted the documents with Ellen's graceful dignity, scanning legal language that represented 11 years of patient planning and careful growth. "What's the current valuation, Mr. Pemberton?" "Including appreciation and dividends reinvested over 11 years. Approximately $230 million. The number hung in the office air like morning mist. Substantial, but somehow less important than the relationships it had both damaged and ultimately strengthened. Peter's voice carried wonder rather than greed. 11 years of earned strength having replaced inherited weakness. "Helena, that's an extraordinary responsibility." "It is," Helena agreed, her tone carrying Ellen's practical certainty, "which is why I've been planning how to handle it responsibly." She pulled out a leather portfolio, the same journal Charles had given her for her 9th birthday, now supplemented with business plans and investment strategies developed during her economics degree at Rice University. Phase 1. Morrison Industries. Dad, I'm transferring controlling interest back to you, effective immediately. You've proven you can build value through effort rather than expectation. Time to prove you can manage the family business the same way. Peter's face went pale, then red, then pale again. Mary squeezed his hand, her smile carrying pride that had been earned through 11 years of shared struggle. Helena, I can't accept. You can and you will. The company needs leadership that understands both strength and humility. You've learned both. Helena turned to her grandfather, her expression carrying Ellen's loving directness. Grandpa Charles, I'm endowing the Ellen Morrison Foundation for Educational Excellence. $100 million dedicated to ensuring that every child in Houston has access to the same quality education that shaped me. Because Grandma believed that intelligence without opportunity was a wasted gift. Charles felt Ellen's presence stronger than he had since her death, her voice carrying approval across 11 years of patient transformation. She would love this, Helena. I know. And Mom, Helena addressed Mary with the warmth of genuine affection. The foundation needs someone who understands both educational administration and the complexities of family dynamics. Someone who's learned that strength comes from service rather than status. Interested in becoming the executive director? Mary's tears came without warning. 11 years of earned redemption crystallizing into unexpected opportunity. Helena, yes, absolutely. Helena stood, moving to the office window that overlooked the Houston skyline, where all money and aerospace ambitions reached toward the Texas sky. That leaves $30 million for personal use. Enough to live comfortably, travel extensively, and ensure that little Ellen has the same educational opportunities that shaped all of us. She turned back to her family, her expression carrying the particular satisfaction of someone who discovered that mercy was more powerful than justice. That restoration could be more valuable than revenge. Grandpa Charles, you taught me that strength is earned daily. Dad, you proved that weakness can be temporary if someone refuses to accept it as permanent. Mom, you showed me that even calculations can develop hearts if given enough time and pressure. Helena moved to little Ellen's chair, kneeling beside her sister with the gentle authority that Ellen Morrison had modeled in life and death. And you, little bird, are going to learn that the most valuable inheritance isn't money. It's the character that makes someone worthy of inheriting it. Ellen looked up from her coloring, her 5-year-old wisdom cutting through adult complexity with devastating clarity. Does this mean we're rich again? Helena's laugh carried Ellen's musical certainty and Charles's strategic satisfaction. No, sweetheart, this means we're finally wealthy. Harold Pemberton watched the Morrison family embrace in his corner office. 3 generations united by adversity, overcome, and character earned rather than inherited. In 40 years of legal practice, he'd never seen estate planning produce such comprehensive transformation. Outside the windows, Houston's skyline glittered in the afternoon sun. Monuments to oil money and aerospace dreams. Testaments to the peculiar Texas belief that anything could be built if you possessed sufficient determination and weren't too particular about the methods required. But in his office, Harold witnessed something rarer than financial success or business empire. A family that had learned to be worthy of its wealth, that had discovered strength through struggle and grace through testing. Charles Morrison had built an empire through intelligence and ruthlessness. His granddaughter had inherited both qualities, then improved them with wisdom and mercy. Some legacies, Harold reflected, were worth the patience required to perfect them. Through the window, Houston hummed with the eternal rhythm of commerce and ambition. But in the law offices of Pemberton and Associates, 4 generations of the Morrison family, 3 present, 1 remembered, had finally learned the difference between having money and being wealthy. Ellen Morrison would have been proud. Charles Morrison was. And Helena Morrison understood that the most valuable thing she'd inherited wasn't the trust fund. It was the knowledge that character was the only currency that appreciated with age. The only investment that guaranteed returns worth counting. The Morrison family had finally learned to be worthy of their name. That was inheritance enough for any lifetime. Thank you for staying with me and listening this far. Your attention is a gift. Did these minutes mean something to you? Then please follow the channel. Every click from you is a push that helps me keep bringing stories that truly stay with us.